Heka is the god of magic and medicine in ancient Egypt and is also the personification of magic itself. He is probably the most important god in Egyptian mythology but is often overlooked because his presence was so pervasive as to make him almost invisible to the Egyptologists of the 19th and 20th centuries CE. Unlike the well-known Osiris and Isis, Heka had no cult following, no ritual worship, and no temples, except in the late period of ancient Egypt, 525 to 323 BCE. He is mentioned primarily in medical texts and magical spells and incantations and, because of this, was relegated to the realm of superstition rather than religious belief. Although he is not featured by name in the best-known myths, he was regarded by the ancient Egyptians as the power behind the gods whose names and stories have become synonymous with Egyptian culture. Magic was considered present at the birth of creation, was, in fact, the operative force in the creative act, and so Heka is among the oldest gods of Egypt, recognized as early as the pre-dynastic period in Egypt and appearing in inscriptions in the early dynastic period. He was depicted in anthropomorphic form as a man in royal dress wearing the regal curved beard of the gods and carrying a staff entwined with two serpents. This symbol, originally associated with the healing god Ninazu of Sumer, son of the goddess Gula, was adopted for Heka and traveled to Greece where it became associated with their healing god Asclepius, and today is the caduceus, symbol of the medical profession. Heka is also sometimes represented as the two gods most closely tied to him, Sia and Hu, and, beginning in the late period, he is depicted as a child and, at the same time, is seen as the son of Menet and Khnum as part of the triad of Letopolis. He is frequently seen in funerary texts and inscriptions guiding the soul of the deceased to the afterlife and is often mentioned in medical texts and spells. The pyramid texts and the coffin texts both claim Heka as their authority, the god whose power makes the texts true, and, according to Egyptologist Richard H. Wilkinson, he was viewed as a god of inestimable power who was feared by the other gods. Although he is not featured by name in the best-known myths, he was regarded by the ancient Egyptians as the power behind the gods whose names and stories have become synonymous with Egyptian culture. Heka referred to the deity, the concept, and the practice of magic. Since magic was a significant aspect of medical practice, a physician would invoke Heka in order to practice Heka. The universe was created and given form by magical means, and magic sustained both the visible and invisible worlds. Heka was thought to have been present at creation and was the generative power the gods drew upon in order to create life. In the coffin texts, written circa 2134 to 2040 BCE, the god speaks to this directly, saying, "To me belonged the universe before you gods came into being. You have come afterwards because I'm Heka." Heka, therefore, had no parents, no origin, he had always existed. To human beings, he finds expression in the heart and the tongue, represented by two other gods, Sia and Hu. Heka, Sia, and Hu were responsible for creation as well as for maintenance of the world and the regulation of human birth, life, and death. Creator, sustainer, protector. At the beginning of time, the god Atum emerged from the swirling waters of chaos to stand on the first dry land, the primordial Ben, to begin the act of creation. Heka was thought to have been with him at this moment and was the power he drew upon. Heka and medicine. In the present day, most people do not associate magic with medicine, but for the ancient Egyptians, the two were almost one discipline. The Ebers Papyrus, circa 1550 BCE, one of the most complete medical texts extant, claims that medicine is effective with magic just as magic is effective with medicine. Since disease was thought to have a supernatural origin, a supernatural defense was the best course. Diseases were caused either by the will of the gods, an evil demon, or an angry spirit, and spells against these demons and spirits, or invoking the help of the gods, were common cures for sickness throughout Egypt's history. Egyptian doctors, known as priests of Heka, were not trying to trick a patient with some sleight of hand but were invoking real powers to effect a cure. This practice, Heka, called upon the deity which made it possible, Heka, as well as other gods who were thought to be especially helpful in whatever disease presented itself. In medicine, the laws of nature as personified by the gods were invoked in order to cure a patient. But Heka was also practiced in many other areas of one's life and, often, in the same way. Heka in daily life. The physician priest who was called to one's home would use amulets, spells, charms, and incantations to cure the patient, and these same would be used by people every day in any other circumstance. Amulets of the dead, the ankh, the scarab, the jet and many other Egyptian symbols were commonly worn for protection or to invoke the aid of a god. Tattoos in ancient Egypt were also considered powerful forms of protection, and the god Bes, a powerful protective deity, was among the most popular. Bes watched over pregnant women and children but was also a general protective deity who infused life with joy and spontaneity. This particular god illustrates well how Heka was understood by the Egyptians, in that he was definitely an individual with a recognizable character and sphere of influence, but the force, the power, by which he operated and through which one could communicate with him was Heka. Magical practices such as the wearing of an amulet, inscriptions above or beside a door, hanging vegetables like onions to ward off evil spirits, reciting a certain incantation or spell before starting on a journey or simply going fishing, all of these were invoking the power of Heka no matter what other deity was called on. One of the best examples of this, besides the medical texts in general, is the relatively unknown spell, the magical lullaby, which was recited by mothers to protect their children at bedtime. In this short poem, dated 17th or 16th century BCE, the speaker orders evil spirits out of the house with a warning of the spiritual weapons she has at her disposal. No specific deity is invoked, although Bes amulets or images were frequently hung in a child's room, but it is clear the speaker has the ability to keep the child safe from harm and the authority to issue the warning. That authority would have been the power of Heka in action.